Hi there, welcome to my studio. This is Kate. I thought I would do something very, very simple this morning, which is a view of Killiney Bay, and for that I'm going to be working from a couple of different photographs. This is a scene that I know very, very well. I've been painting for many years now, and I frequently go there with my little dog. I used to be able to take the watercolours too and sketch, but it became a little bit problematic with the dog because anyone who came over to talk to me to see what I was doing, the dog would think, oh, you know, I need to protect my master, and you know, so he would get a little bit stroppy. So instead, what I do when I go for a walk now, I just try and absorb everything, drink it all in and commit it to memory. And then, of course, I take photographs. I probably come home every morning with about 30 new photographs, and I build this into my store. So I have a few favourite ones. This one I've been using for quite some time. It's not a spectacular photograph in itself, but it gives me a nice clear view of the headland of Bray and County Wicklow with the Sugarloaf and the sweep around the bay, Killiney Bay. And there's a little bit of foreground interest here, which is quite nice too. I use this picture for the detail in the headland. Some of the other photographs I use, I might take the tree out of this. It's from the same area, a different day, but it has a lovely light on the water and a beautiful tree in the foreground. But as you can see, the headland is actually more misty, and I can't see the detail too well in that. So what I'll do is I'll merge the two together and do a little picture from the combination. I do have other scenes, or photos I should say, of the same place. This is, see if I can line this up right, this is looking through the trees, again taken from Killiney Hill. It's a lovely one, the winter trees, but you can see the headland is completely misted out. So again, I would use the headland from the other photograph and with this. And there's another lovely one here, which is, oh, I've taken a whole series of these. Again, it's the same view, but you can only see a weensy bit of the headland there. But what really attracts me to this one is that it's just so abstract, and it's one of those, like a Zen photograph. It completely relaxes your mind. And I have done other little ones of that, but for the moment I'm going to do one that is recognizable to you and show you the different stages. Now, I'm going to film it in two parts, so there'll be a bit of a jump halfway through, and the reason for that is that the first part I wanted to show you my palette as well, and the colours that I'm using. It's very, very basic, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue and burnt sienna, or sometimes light red. It's a little bit warmer and heavier paint pigment. And so I wanted the palette to be in the picture for that. And then the next part, where I'm doing the second stage, which is basically the meat of the picture, if you like, I've zoomed in a little bit so that you can see the detail. Now, as I said before, this is all quite new, the setup, so it's trial and error, so I'm just hoping that you'll be able to follow along as best you can. And if you are interested, just message me and I can send you the details of the materials that I use and the colours that I'm using, and any other questions that you might have. Okay, so I'll get on with the demonstration now, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's of some use, and if there are any other questions, or you think, oh, you know, I'd like for you to include this bit next time, just let me know and I'll put them all in. Okay, so thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye. Right, I'm going to start this little one of Killiney Bay, and this is a view that I know really, really well. I've been going for walks here with my little dog almost every day, so it is a beautiful scene. Now, the photograph that I have here, I use this one for the outline of the headland. So we have Bray Head here. Just wondering, am I getting it all in? We have Bray Head, and then I think this is Two Rock, and then the Sugarloaf. I may not get the entire thing in, but I also use other reference photos for the light on the water. So I'm going to start off with this one, and then let me see. This is another lovely one with the light on the water. Now the tree is positioned, you know, right in the middle, which wouldn't work well for a composition. So I'm going to put that to the left. And as you can see here, the headland is actually quite a bit misty. So it's difficult to work from that one. So I'm going to go back to this one to work, but I'm going to try and get the same kind of atmosphere in this. Okay. Now I've set myself up. I'm a little bit cramped here because normally I don't have my palette right beside where I work. I would have it, well, it is right beside where I work. I have it not alongside where I'm painting. I have it just a little bit off. So I'm kind of, you know, a little bit restricted here, but we'll see how we get on anyway. So what I start off first with is the horizon. And let me see now. I'm going to do quite a high horizon. So I'm going to divide the paper, not quite in two, because I don't want to have the horizon right in the middle. I just want it a little bit higher than normal. And then I am going to have, I'm just going to put a little indication in there for grey stones. Then I will have the headland, Bray Head, then the harbour. Then we have another little beach here, and I'm just bringing the ruler down, but using little horizontal strokes like that to actually give me a sweep around. Now the reason for doing that is if you were to draw the horizon as it comes down like this, or the horizon, the headland, as it comes down like this, it would look wrong. It would look like it's lifting off the page. So I keep the lines very horizontal like that. Okay, probably the pencil lines are a bit too light. If it turns out that that's the case, I shall just edit that and get back to it later. This is all experimental. I'm not sure how much the camera can pick up. I could zoom it in a little bit more, but then you wouldn't see the palette and you wouldn't know the colours I was mixing. So I'm just going to go right ahead and see how this actually works out. So now, you see, I'm not sure what the name of this is. I always forget. Is it Two Rock? Because we live in Sandyford beside the Three Rock. Anyway, who knows? So I'm just light pencil lines now for the mountain behind. And we'd have to sweep for the Sugarloaf coming up here, which is going off. You know, this little piece is, it's almost 6x4. It's the smallest one that I do. And it's quite handy. It's quite a handy size for doing landscapes because it forces you to eliminate superfluous detail. And that's always a good thing with landscape because you want to get the atmosphere. You don't want to get too much clutter. Let me see now. This comes down. I've got Killiney along here, and then the beach. It comes out a little bit more there, coming along like this, and then back in there. Now what we have here, rocks and a little bit of tree. So this is the composition I'm going to use, but I'm going to refer back to the other photograph for the colouring. I'm just giving a little indication there. Now, so I'll start with this. I use one of my largest brushes. This is Pro Art Killiney Sable, number 12. And it is a pure sable. The reason for using sable brushes is that they hold more water and they hold more paint. So gives you a fully charged brush. Now I'm going to start off, I've mixed a mixture of cobalt and ultramarine there. So now what I want to do is, I'll keep that close, but I want to get that effect of the light on the water. Now, also with this, you'll see the light on the water is over to the left. So I'm going to bring it so that it's more central. So I'm bringing two things together, a little bit of artistic license, but it works for the picture, so that's the main thing. Now I've put a tiny touch of light red into that blue to get a grey, and the reason why I do that is if it's too blue, well, the sky isn't blue anyway, it's quite grey. It'll just look too unreal. So I tend to use, this one here is burnt sienna, I tend to use a reddish brown, and I use the brush on its side like that to get some broken effects. Just go back to some more cobalt there. I just want to say, while I'm working on this, I'm very aware, even if I film it without speaking, the fact that I'm filming it makes me fiddle a bit, because I'll be concentrating on saying something, and then while I'm doing that, my brush has a mind of its own. And it can be overworked, so it is actually quite difficult to orchestrate. So just to keep that in mind. But the reason for doing this is to just show you my method of working and how I build the picture up. Now that's got quite a lot heavier, and you'll probably think, oh my gosh, it's much too dark. The thing is, with watercolour, it always dries much lighter, and it's guesswork really as to how it will turn out in the end if you're just beginning with watercolours. But even if the colour isn't exactly right, you just need the drama. So it's much better to go darker than lighter. Now I'm adding water to the mix. There's still paint in my brush, but I'm letting some of it go out, and then I'm blotting beside with a kitchen towel. And I want the sky to be much lighter here. Towel is there. So I'm banging into everything here as it's all pushed over. It's a tiny bit speckly still, so I'm just going to go into that area. I'm going to strengthen up that colour a little bit. Go back to my grey. The grey in the photograph is actually kind of a green grey. It's very cold. I nearly always prefer a warm grey. Just strengthen this cloud in here. You can just dot the colour in, and then you'll get some little, splurges, which is always very nice. The lovely thing about watercolour is that you're not entirely in control. You let the paint do its own thing to a large extent. So I'm going to use the brush on its side here to do the sparkles on the water. The brush here doesn't get very wet. It's actually quite a dry mixture, so I blot it to see. I mix the colour up and then I blot it. Now that's actually probably a little bit too dry, but you're better too dry than too wet, because if it's too wet you won't get this effect of the light, because the brush is picking up the texture of the paper. Now what I don't want is too many lines, you see, like this. It'll make it look a little bit false. So what I shall do now is add a little Viridian green, go back to my ultramarine, add a little bit of water, and I'm going to bring it down to here. I may just eliminate part of that rock. So with a little bit of fresh water, then go back in, a little blend. blend a little bit. Now I'm aware that my brush is holding a lot of water, so I'm going to change down now to a smaller brush. This one is, again, it's Pro Art Series 100, and this one is a mixture of sable and nylon. And the reason why I like these is that they have more spring, so there's a tiny bit more control. So when I need to limit the amount of paint that goes on, I use these. Now I've put a little bit of Payne's Grey out there, a little bit of burnt sienna, so I've got a grey, quite a neutral grey. I'm going to bring that into the mixture here to darken it, and you can see that it's actually merging with some of the pigment and the wetness that's already on there. Okay. Yeah, I think for simplicity's sake, I won't put as much detail like the rock and things like that, because it's actually going to make it fussy. So now I've got my nylon brush, a little bit of, we'll just clean it off slightly. What I want to do here is just take out a little bit of cloud. So I'm smudging some of the paint off. Actually, it's called lifting off. And this is the tricky thing about watercolour. It's all to do with timing. If you were to try and take this off when it was too dry, you'd get hard marks. If you were trying to take it off when it was too wet, the wash would still keep flowing back in. It wouldn't work. So you can just do that. Keep washing the brush, cleaning it off, and come back to lift out another little bit like that. Maybe trail that off a little bit more into the distance. Now, one more thing I tend to do with these little ones is I do exaggerate the colour slightly. It gives it much more impact. It's so it's a powerful tool to use in doing these little ones. Now I'm actually softening off the edges here. I let them get a little bit too dry. I could have blended that in a little bit better, but this is the problem that I'm up against, because watercolours take all of your attention. You have to absolutely be on the ball timing wise, because you don't get a second chance. Now I've got a not very nice mark here, and I want to make that softer. So I'm just going to scrub the brush along, all the time following a horizontal brush stroke, because I'm painting the sea, and the sea lies flat for the most part, unless you're doing a Turner-esque style picture. So I'll just lift that a little bit. Then I like to squint and see, oh yeah, there's way too much sparkle in the water there, because if it's in too many places, it's not going to give any impact to the one place that you want it in, which is sort of here, because you want to lead the eye in here. So I'm going to blend a little bit more. The thing to remember with watercolour is every little mark counts. There's no such thing as undercoating with watercolour. Your first wash that goes on is going to have impact. It's going to tell a story. It's going to make an atmosphere. So now this is quite nice now. It's rough, it's unfinished, but for my first wash I can always get rid of too many of the white bits that might come in here, but they may come in handy later on, because if I'm going to do bushes in the foreground here, if they're just flat, it'll look flat and it will just look like something's in the way of the picture. It won't look part of the actual, the scene itself. So at this stage now, that's my first stage. I have to wait for this to dry, and when it is dry, then the next stage will be to work on the land and bring some detail into the sea to sort of knit those two together. Okay, so I'm going to stop now, wait for it to dry and come back in a minute. Right, I've moved the camera in a little bit because otherwise you won't see any of the detail. It was important to show you the wider view when I was getting the first washes on. So it's nice and dry now. The next thing that I'm going to do is just give a little bit of a hint to the horizon. So I'm going off camera to mix the colours, but it's the same basic colours that I used first: cobalt blue, ultramarine, and burnt sienna. I'm just going to touch a bit more water in there. So what I want to do is just pick up the faint line of the horizon, and I'm using a smaller brush now. This is a number 6. It's a Pro Art again, and it is the combination of sable and nylon. So it's lovely and soft, holds a decent amount of water, but it also, it's got more strength in it. The sables can be a little bit floppy at times, which actually quite annoys me, especially if I'm trying to draw with a brush. So that's what I'm actually doing here. I'm drawing in the horizon, again making sure that I keep it very, very light. I can begin to get a little bit heavier coming down now, and then I can bring some more stronger colours in, again working always horizontally, and I'm using the side of my brush. The reason that I use the side is that I get a different mark. There's all sorts of exercises that you can do, especially if you look up Chinese brush painting and look at the different things that you can do with each brush. You know, you can make marks like this, or you know, full brush marks, things like that. It's all a question of practice. So I shall do that another time. But for the moment, I'm just going to draw in the headland. Now this is quite tricky because if you look at the detail, there's lots of little tiny bumps, highs and lows. So it's important to get this quite accurate, otherwise it will look like it's a sinking ship or Loch Ness Monster or fill in the blank. Now the light may be changing now as well. It's just gone very, very cloudy, like it's going to rain. So I hope there's still enough light to keep this looking okay with the colours and everything. Right, so now I've got my mountains in. I'm using a little bit more water and blotting to control the amount that's actually on my brush. And I want to suggest not so much detail in the headland here, but a little bit of texture. So I'll just lift out the same way that I did for the clouds. I'm just going to lift out a tiny bit to suggest light or patterns on the mountain itself. And the distant hill just in here. The nice thing about mountains is that you can do one merging into another because they change, they constantly change. So here I'm actually painting a little bit of a dark tone into the wet, so it'll give me a soft line along here, but that's actually quite nice. So I might continue that into here where we've got the pier in Bray, the harbour I should say, and then coming along here a little bit darker again. And I think I need a wee bit of green in here, so I'll just, the green I used earlier was Viridian green, which is actually quite a synthetic colour. I mean, it looks quite wild, but in fact it's the purest green, and it's the best green to mix for the base of green colours when you're doing landscapes, because it is actually quite pure. Lots of greens, tube greens, would be quite muddy when you mix them, because they're actually made, they're already a mixture of several different colours together. You know, it's a neutral shade, so it would be mostly blue and yellow to make green, but then it's toned down with red a little bit. So where you have the three primary colours together in any form, in any mix form, you will actually get a version of grey, which technically is what green in the landscape is. So it's all different tones of grey. And again, it's only by experimentation and practice that you learn what the best is. Now I'm just going to put a little hint of a headland back there, which would be Greystones Harbour, but we just want to suggest it. So now let me see, I sort of take myself back a little bit, close one eye and see, okay, this needs to be blended in a wee bit. But because it's in the distance, I don't have to be too fussy about details like houses or trees, or even the lines of the trees, the different fields and things like that. I'll just give a little bit more of emphasis to the beach along here, and I've splayed out the brush a tiny bit, I don't know if you can see, and I'm painting very softly, like as if the brush was a feather. I'm bringing it down like that, so you're hinting at what's there. And it's always very important to remember that when you're painting, you're not painting the exact thing that's in front of your eyes. You have to paint the illusion of it, because if you did try to paint the exact thing, it would look false. It's a complete paradox. And to this day, I still have to remind myself to do that. Crazy. Anyway, so now that's enough in there for the moment. I've just strengthened the horizon there. I need to strengthen the water. I'm just going to move up a brush to maybe, let me see now, I think this is a number 8. And I need to put a little bit more of a strong colour in the sea to give more depth. So this is where I'm exaggerating slightly, because if you were to just copy the photograph, it's quite bland, it's very, that one is anyway. Oh, that's out of shot, sorry, you can't see that, I've forgotten now, I've moved the camera, but again, this is all creating the illusion. I'm actually strengthening these colours just a tiny bit more. Now I don't want too many white bits appearing at the edge, because the contrast areas where you've got white, the white of the paper coming through and the dark paint, that draws the eye. So you've got to be careful about where exactly you're putting these. Okay, so now I'm going to use a mixture of Payne's grey, actually a little bit of light red, or actually this is Venetian red. Light red is similar. I blot my brush, and I've got some bushes here. This wash here is dry, a tiny bit wet here, but I hardly put any colour on to actually, I don't need to worry about it too much. I'm just blotting the brush slightly. So the brush on its side again, and here I'm actually leaving gaps of white coming through, but it's not pure white, it's my underneath wash. Let's get that little hair out. So what I want to suggest here is just a few hedges, possibly the gorse that grows. If your marks don't come out broken enough, that means your brush is too wet. I don't want a line across there, so I'm going to increase. Again, this is just aesthetic license. Block in a little bit here because I do want to give the effect that this is quite dense bush. And here is going to be my tree. So I've moved it right across so that there's a better view of the headland. Again, I'm using the brush on its side like that to make a broken line. And this is important so that I catch it, you know, the effect means that I get the feeling of light catching the branches. And then to draw some branches, use the tip of the brush. I might dry this off to make it a little bit more dry brush. So it's going to just suggest a tree. Now this is actually quite hard to do when I'm talking as well, so sometimes I end up with a funny looking tree. Best thing is to not overdo it. Famous last words. The other thing that you can do at this stage, I have a black watercolour pencil, and I just dip it in the water and use it to draw the branches. The reason for doing this is that it'll give me a varied line, quite black areas, quite light areas in some places, and sort of a little bit of a broken line. Again, it's just so that the tree looks more organic rather than out of a box, you know. Okay, so that's, I've kind of gone over it again. You see, this is what I do when I'm demonstrating. I overwork things, but not to worry. I'm going to leave it at that. Now I'm just going to take some more of that dark mixture, blot the brush, and suggest some foliage. So I want to obliterate a little bit of the spikiness of the tree and just add in a touch of the foliage. I'm just mixing a slightly lighter neutral colour here, so I've got some browns. Right, okay. And of course the watercolour pencil goes on working, as in if I touch a wet brush against it, it'll actually start spreading out a wee bit. Okay. I've noticed I've gone a little bit overboard here. It's just a little bit of a thick mark that needs to be refined slightly. Now I'm going to go back to more Payne's Grey, Ultramarine and a light red to make up a juicier mixture, because I'm going to go again the same brush stroke as I did before. Onto the foreground. And that just gives a nice contrast, which makes the light in the water lift add a couple of little twiggy bits here. Yeah, and that's more or less it. When this part is dry, it's a nice idea to just pick out just a tiny, tiny bit more in there, but be careful not to overwork because it'll destroy the effect. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Maybe bring down some of those white bits there. Okay. So that's my little demo for the moment. I hope you enjoyed it. When I get a little bit more time, I'll put up notes on the website so that you see the colours listed and the techniques listed. But there's nothing that substitutes actually just practicing, going ahead and having a go. If I had a little palette, or not a palette, sorry, a mount now, I would put it around and say, and here's my finished piece, but I haven't at the moment, so I'll have to do that right at the end, okay? So I'll see you all later, and I hope that's inspired you to just take your brushes out and have a little bit of a practice. Of course, it's fine for me to say it's easy when you know how, but I think if you know, it does take a long time to practice all of those different brush strokes, but if you can see the process of what goes on first, what's next, and what's the final stage, it actually helps in your mind to know this, to plan the picture out, because a lot of watercolour painting is all to do with having painted it in your mind first, and then knowing the steps to do. Very few watercolours turn out right if you just do it, oh, I'll just slop this on and see what happens, and I'll slop that on. I mean, you can get amazing effects, but not when you're trying to paint a landscape. I don't think. You do need to plan where your whites are going to be, how dry you want this part of the paper to be, how wet you want the other part of the paper to be. So there's a lot going on. So it's just all practice. And so, yeah, so I hope you have fun with that. Okay, see you later. Bye.